You're listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast.
Welcome to The Whole Truth podcast. I'm Paul Armstrong's business partner, Nicholas Reid, filling in for him for the last time as Paul finishes off his fishing expedition up north. Let's hope he caught some big ones. I'm sure we'll find out next week. I just had a fascinating chat with Dr. Matt Greentree. He's the Managing Director of Ausgold, a junior gold company with big ambitions to transform itself into the next significant gold producer on the ASX over the next couple of years. To be fair, Ausgold is a name that's been kicking around the junior resources space in WA for some time. After listing all the way back in 2009, the company started out life exploring the famed Dulgunna region of WA near Sandfire Resources' spectacular DeGrussa discovery. In 2010, it turned its attention to the Katanning gold project, located in Wheatbelt country around 3 hours drive south of Perth. Lots of water's gone under the bridge since then, so I'm going to fast forward to last month when Ausgold unveiled a major resource upgrade for Katanning to just a shade over 3 million ounces. The announcement attracted a fair bit of attention as it positions Katanning as the largest free-milling open-cut gold development project in WA. Underpinned by this impressive resource, a feasibility is already well underway for a 5 million tonne a year operation that could see Katanning become one of the largest new gold projects in Australia. As you'll hear, this is a project that ticks a lot of boxes from an investor's perspective, and yet it's been flying under the radar in a number of respects. But that could all be about to change as Ausgold starts to make the transition from explorer to developer and ultimately producer. Matt, it's been a big month or so for Ausgold following your resource upgrade. Do you think Ausgold is finally coming of age?
Yeah, look, it's been a journey for Ausgold, and we've had high ambitions for a long time, holding a land package, 5,500 square kilometres in the region that's not had the exploration attention that the rest of the Yilgarn has, but the 3 million ounce mark for the resource really does demonstrate the project and the region has scale to host very large ore bodies. Our pre-feasibility study last year highlighted the potential there, and we've only grown that with more drilling and expanding out the resource. If you have a look at any of our presentations, we also demonstrate outside the resources further potential. So we continue on as an explorer alongside our development. So we've got that two-pronged strategy. So yes, I guess to answer your first question, we are coming of age. We're looking at the project through a development lens now. So we're bringing through the view on that scale, larger 5 million tonne throughput. That gives us 155,000 ounces over the first 6 years or so. Long life of mine, 10 years plus, and we're continuing to add resource. So every time we've put a resource statement out, the resource got bigger, we've improved the grade, we've also improved our understanding of the geology in that region. And I think that's something that is probably quite an important thing to discuss as well. We're working in a region that hasn't received much exploration in the past. And now there's lots of reasons for that, and you can take analogies, the Yamana district with Gold Road, the Pilbara with De Grey. It does take a while to understand the region, and these discoveries sometimes don't come easily early on. But as the geologist understands what these deposits look like and starts adding and building onto those, you start to see that resource growth. And over the last couple of years, we've added over 2 million ounces in the last couple of resource upgrades. So we've seen a fairly large expansion in that resource growth.
Just before we go into what's coming up, because it is a really exciting time for the company, I just did want to touch a little bit on the history, not for long, because we know that good gold stories can take a while to come to fruition. But one of the fascinating things about this project is that it was actually mined, wasn't it? And so tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, look, the gold was first discovered in 1979 by Alder Gold in this region, stream sediment anomaly. There's been a few little scratchings around the district for gold and copper and a little bit of silver. So there's been a view that there's mineralisation around, and there's no surprises there. It's part of the Yilgarn Craton. It's one of the biggest gold-producing regions in the world. But the rocks look a little different to what we see in the Eastern Goldfields, and I think that's thrown a lot of companies off the scent. And combined with being on freehold land, so there's a bit of discussion required with the farmers before you march in and start drilling. I think that's really discouraged a lot of explorers. But there was that discovery in 79 and mining in the late 1990s. Now, that mining phase lasted about 18 months and was probably ill-conceived at the time. It was put together in the lowest gold price environment in living memory. 1997, I think anyone who's been in industry for some time probably remembers that as probably the worst time for gold.
Yeah, absolutely. They were tough times. But so you've got what was a gold mine. You've done a lot of work. You've built up what is a 3 million ounce resource inventory. It's pretty impressive. And essentially it's an entire sort of greenstone belt as well, isn't it? So no different to what you see in the eastern and northeastern goldfields.
No, not at all. And we've mapped out 2,500 square kilometres of greenstone. So if you look at it, all our sort of mid-tier peers, they'd be envious of that scale of project. It's, as a first mover, we've had the opportunity to put our foot on that ground.
And typically with the sort of gold assets that you see in the Eastern Goldfields, once you're onto one of these greenstone hosted assets, they often can keep growing for many, many, many years, decades even, into the future. There's no reason why this is any different to that, is there?
No, I don't think so. The 3 million ounces occur over about 2.5-3 kilometre strike length. We've mapped out gold mineralisation along that structure for over 20 kilometres. So I think, over time, we'll start to see that resource inventory grow. As I alluded to earlier, every time we drill, we find more gold and we build out that resource. And that's putting aside some of these other areas that we're fairly bullish on. We did some work and upgraded the resource at Datatine in the last resource statement, and there's more work to do that, and that's on the northern end of our project. But there's also areas like Stanley and Duggan, which have shown some very high-grade intercepts, and we're working on those at the moment. And I think that's the sort of thing that we'll see some material growth in the future.
So let's talk about the development story quickly, because it's a good one. It was August 22, I think, that you put out your pre-feasibility study. What did that tell you, essentially?
Yeah, so we put that out August 1st, first day of Diggers and Dealers in 22. And look, what it showed was some scale that I think the market hadn't appreciated before. We had a 2.16 million ounce resource at the time, and the ore reserve converted to a 1.28 million ounce ore reserve. So one of the largest, if not the largest, open pit resource in Western Australia, if you take away De Grey. And it also showed options and potential for scale. So there's a couple of things in that. We used a fairly high cutoff grade and effectively high graded that ore reserve, and it showed really good economics. But what we also recognised, and we put that in that statement, is there's a clear pathway for a much larger project, and we investigated that through the earlier part of this year, and that's where we've looked at expanding the project from 3 million tonnes per annum, which delivered around 100,000 ounces gold, to something much larger, to a 5 million tonne project, which really is a step change and gives us 155,000 ounces over those first critical years. And there's a couple of years in there that we're getting close to 200,000 ounce mark. So there's some options there, and part of the view we have as a company is that introducing some more high-grade material and looking at some of our regional plays, as well as some of the depth extents of the main Jinkers ore body, there's an opportunity to add that material in life of mine and expand that gold production as well.
So you're now working on that expanded scale of project, which is a really interesting point, because there's not a lot coming up in the gold space of scale, is there?
No, I think there's been a real lack of exploration wholesale across Western Australia for gold particularly. Even looking at Diggers and Dealers this year, it was very much a battery metals conference. Although it's traditionally a goldfields conference, it's the view of gold developments is pretty short at the moment. There's one or two out there. Obviously, De Grey has done a great job and now look at financing Hemi, but there's Capricorn with their project in the Murchison there, and I think there's limited other scale that we've seen around the goldfields.
So you fit into a space where, sort of 150 to 200,000 ounces, where you really start to attract some serious attention at that scale. And as you say, outside of De Grey, and that's been a fantastic story, there's not a lot else coming through the pipeline.
No, it's a pretty, I think in terms of developers, there's not a lot coming through. So I think a simple project like this, it's free milling, it's well supported by infrastructure in a farming community. And I think that's something else worth discussing, is that it does look a little different to other projects. It's not in a remote setting. We've got roads to site and a community within 30 kilometres that's very, very supportive of what we're doing and wants to see this development go forward.
I was going to ask you about that, because 3 hours south of Perth, it's a pretty amazing location. Great for site visits, isn't it? But are there any downsides to that? Or, I mean, how does the community view a new project like this?
Look, all projects have a community and stakeholders that you have to engage with, and this is no different. Our community is traditionally a farming community, and it does take a bit of education to demonstrate what a mining operation looks like. Even though there has been mining here in the past, it's of a much smaller scale that we're considering in this project. But having said that, up the road from us, there's Boddington, which is one of Australia's biggest gold mines. I've got Greenbushes to the southwest of us and Ravensthorpe to the southeast of us. So it's not completely isolated in terms of mining, but it is a different environment to develop a project. And there are different considerations there.
So what does the next, I suppose, period look like for Ausgold, Matt? What are the milestones, and how does the project move forward from here?
Yeah, look, we're moving through this period where we're doing a lot of work in terms of the studies through the DFS study. A lot of that's not as exciting as massive resource growth, but it's incredibly important and does demonstrate the economics of a mining operation, and that's where we're ultimately heading. We've shown that this is an economic project through the PFS, and now we're tightening that up through the DFS, ready to build this. The important milestones now are the delivery of that DFS. Alongside that, we're putting together the permitting for the EPA, and those permits will enable us to finance the project and develop it. So those key milestones, we're moving through in 2024, and I expect to see some of those decisions to be made sort of towards the end of that year.
So going back to our opening line about Ausgold coming of age, is it conceivable that you could be looking at a investment decision sometime next year? And I don't want to hold you to timelines, but
look, I think the investment decision will probably be early in 2025. In all honesty, but we're moving in that pathway as quickly as we can.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's things are getting real now.
Oh, absolutely. And you can see that with some of our latest announcements. The purchase of the property down there is one of those. We're doing that to secure the infrastructure footprint for the project, and we're moving through those approvals processes as we speak.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that property purchase. That's a real indication of intent, isn't it? That this project is moving forward.
Oh, absolutely. No, we've definitely made a commitment there as we move through, purchase the property, develop the project.
And What about exploration? We've touched on the underexplored nature of this part of the southwest Yilgarn. Do you keep exploring while you do the development streams and, go through that classic Lassonde curve of, developer and ultimately producer?
Yeah, it's always a balancing act where you put your capital there. We've got a large land holding around us, and there's, I guess, a couple of things we're looking at in terms of exploration. It is a massively underexplored region of Western Australia. And we've just put out actually on our LinkedIn profile there that the GSWA are running a deep seismic survey across the entire southwest, which interestingly goes right through our ground, and will be really interesting to see in the new year, because these structures that host the Katanning Gold Project are very long-lived and very deep structures, and have the potential to host some very large ore bodies. And we see that already. A couple of those projects I've spoken to, Boddington, Greenbushes, even Chalice's Julimar discovery, are all in the southwest Yilgarn along some of these long-lived structures, really important to the architecture of the Yilgarn Craton. They've never really been looked at in the detail that we are at the moment. And our main focus in terms of exploration is obviously gold. We've got some advanced prospects that have shown gold mineralisation in drilling, economic grades. And if you have a look at Stanley or Duggan, there's some very substantial grades, over 100 grams per tonne in there. And those don't come from, well, they come from somewhere. So those grades, we're looking at supporting that, and how could that form a resource. And because we've got the ground holding around it, gives us an opportunity to do that systematic exploration that leads to those large discoveries. Alongside that, we're also looking at these greenstones through the lens of the battery metal space. We're not that far from Greenbushes, particularly on our Western Coconut project. It's about 60 kilometres on the road there from that project. So there's some real opportunities for lithium exploration here. And we've been doing some very low-cost sampling work across the region. And there's some thoughts around how we, take that forward. Do we do that as Ausgold, or do we bring a partner in to help accelerate that project? And there's going to be some movement in that space.
Yeah, that's a very interesting angle, Matt, and I can't let you go without asking you a bit more about that, because as we know, there's a lot of interest still in lithium exploration, and there was a period where every gold company seemed to have its lithium story to add in. But your lithium stories, gosh, that's a very real one, because Greenbushes is one of the best lithium mines in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's one of the largest, and it's been there for a long time in terms of mining. It was a tin mine, the tantalum mine, now a lithium mine. And it doesn't seem to have any friends in the neighbourhood. So we're in the neighbourhood, and so we're having a close look at that. We've also got Ravensthorpe on our eastern side as well. So there is obvious a gap there in terms of what we think is an exploration gap rather than a resource gap. We're working through that. We conducted a stream sediment sampling program, and we didn't expect to see an ore body straight out of that. But what it does do is highlight areas that have potential and demonstrate elevated pathfinder minerals, cesium, potassium, lithium, tantalum. These things will and have been shown up in 14 key target areas across 5,500 square kilometres. So the guys have been on the ground working on that. It's not the best time of year to be accessing the paddock, so it's all been roadside work. So it's early stage, but we are advancing through that. And there's been a number of pegmatite occurrences that we've mapped out through the region. So that's very encouraging. There's a lot of work to be done there. And really what we're looking at doing is developing drill-ready targets for our summer period, which is when the farmers take their crops off from December through to May is our time where we get busy on those paddocks, and that's through our experience. So that's how we've operated over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story, Matt, and it sounds like there's a lot to come, and particularly with the gold, obviously, but there's clearly going to be some value unlocked with the lithium in some shape or form.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's definitely watch that space with both the lithium and the gold story. But we're moving fairly quickly on both.
Matt, it's been great to chat. Thanks for coming on The Whole Truth. We wish you all the very best with the project, and we hope to get you back on again, because this is clearly a project that's moving forward at a rapid pace. So maybe we can even do a podcast down in Katanning sometime.
Absolutely. I'll look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, Matt.
Cheers.
You've been listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast, produced by Resource Media, hosted by Nicholas Reid for Reid Corporate. Please note that Reid Corporate does not provide investment advice, and investors should seek personalised advice before making any investment decisions.